When Vladimir Putin declared his intentions for Ukraine, he had a large army at his disposal, superior artillery, and experience overseeing previous military campaigns. His neighbor, by comparison, was outnumbered, outgunned, and outmatched. The military assessment from the West was a brutal one. Ukraine's forces would be dwarfed by their enemies in most ways. The reality is they still are. Yet Russia's defiant neighbor has somehow managed to stymie the former superpower's three-pronged attack. After 2 weeks of argument, Ukraine's military has held up better than many had predicted. In some cases, they have even been able to stall Russia's advance. Russia's military campaign, by comparison, has suffered several setbacks and been plagued by logistics issues. Some troops have crossed the border with MREs that expired in 2002, the New York Times cited US and other Western officials as reporting. Others have surrendered and sabotaged their own vehicles to avoid fighting. So how is it that Russia's military, the fifth largest in the world, was so unprepared to meet such resistance from a smaller force? Flawed assumptions, possible intelligence failures, and low morale may have all played a hand, according to observers. The Russians underestimated their enemies. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has exposed its military shortcomings, according to retired U.S. Lieutenant General Ben Hodges. One of the key issues so far has been a lack of planning around logistics and supply systems, the former commanding general of U.S. Army forces in Europe told CBS. Military observers have pointed to the 64-kilometer-long military convoy that stalled near Ukraine's capital Kiev on March 3 as just one example. Another was how Russia's ground forces became bogged down outside the northern Ukrainian city of Kharkiv in the first week of the war. A huge Russian military convoy was stuck outside Kiev in early March. The Russian military's logistical system can't support its own troops, according to Frank Ledwidge, a senior lecturer in military capabilities and strategy at the University of Portsmouth. So that gives an opportunity for the Ukrainian forces to do exactly what they are doing, he said. Russia also failed to establish air superiority early on in the war, did not deploy enough troops to execute 3 simultaneous thrusts, and did not properly coordinate fire and maneuver, the Atlantic Council wrote on its blog. Its organizational problems can be traced back to 2 main issues: outdated assumptions and underestimating the enemy, according to Professor Ledwidge. Russia thought its campaign would be fairly straightforward and built its plan accordingly. Yet Russian intelligence would have had access to sources within Ukraine to assist with its military assessment, according to Professor Ledwidge, and should have predicted the Ukrainians would put up a fight. If reports were being sent forward to the effect that the Ukrainians are quite well prepared, they are dynamic, and that's been the assessment Western military analysts had, it seems that those reports were ignored, he said. And that looks like a culture of complacency at the higher levels, which we certainly see, where senior command is not given the information it needed, because they are only given the information that they want to hear. Whether the intelligence failures were due to willful ignorance, corruption, or incompetence, military analysts have been left stumped by Russia's planning failures so far, falling for the Kremlin's propaganda machine. For some time, Vladimir Putin's propaganda machine laid the groundwork for his invasion of Russia's neighbor. Ukraine was supposedly under the control of a drug-addled neo-Nazi elite, its leaders were committing genocide, and NATO was directly threatening Russian security, despite assurances that it would not. In the West, these claims have been dismissed as false. There is no evidence of genocide or any supposed neo-Nazi agenda within Ukraine's government. The country's leader, Volodymyr Zelensky, is a centrist of Jewish origin. Volodymyr Zelensky has previously said he is target number 1 for Russian forces. But in a land where information does not flow as freely, where the terms war and invasion are forbidden by law, these claims appear to have been taken much more seriously. Accounts of Russian prisoners of war show that at least some members were under the impression they were in Ukraine to act as peacekeepers. It was with some surprise then that they encountered intense hostility from Ukrainian forces upon their arrival. Accounts from Russian soldiers suggest some were surprised to encounter hostility from Ukrainian forces. In one account read out by Ukraine's ambassador to the United Nations, Sergei Koslitsya, a Russian soldier confessed to his mother that people were risking their lives to stop Russia's forces from passing. "We were told they would welcome us. And they are falling under our armored vehicles, throwing themselves under the wheels and not allowing us to pass," he allegedly texted his mother before he was. "They call us fascists, Mama. This is so hard." The text messages have not been independently verified, but a lack of information about what may be happening on the front line could eventually cause problems back home in Russia. The angry whispers of heartbroken mothers. Russian parents with sons in the army who have not heard from their children have few sources of information to access, according to Jennifer Mathis, an expert in Russian politics, history and security at Aberystwyth University. Families with sons in the army who have not heard from them directly are pleading for more information. This is where the Committee of Soldiers' Mothers has traditionally stepped in. The group began during the Soviet war in Afghanistan as a network led by the families of soldiers to lobby the Kremlin for their safe return. In the 1980s, a lot of ordinary Soviets began to get really disillusioned with the regime in the sense that they knew their sons were fighting in Afghanistan, and a lot of them didn't come back at all, Professor Mathis told the ABC. Some of them came back very badly injured, or with really serious PTSD, and the stories that they told about their time in the army, the incompetence of the generals, and the hostility that they were met with in Afghanistan, and so on, began to turn public opinion against the military. This was particularly powerful given how venerated the military was as the great heroic institution that won the Second World War, Professor Mathis added. But it took the Chechnya War, which began in 1994, for the committee's outrage at the mistreatment of conscripts to spread throughout Russia at a grassroots level and undermine the entire basis of armed forces recruitment. We've already seen examples in the recent past in Russia of society basically turning against the military. And they turned against the military so much that the whole system of conscription almost collapsed, Professor Mathis said. Russia's war in Chechnya saw hundreds of women traveling to the war zone to find their sons and bring them back home. Already there are reports of mothers, grandmothers and girlfriends searching for information about their loved ones in Ukraine. One mother told the BBC she only realized her son was in Ukraine when her sister saw a photo of him as a prisoner of war on the Facebook page of Ukraine's armed forces chief. Yet the Kremlin's recent crackdown on what information can be reported about Russia's activities means past whisper campaigns will be harder to repeat. It is also unlikely that hordes of angry middle-aged women are going to storm the Kremlin and throw Putin out, Professor Mathis cautioned. Instead, a generalized sense of unease may spread from person to person. Demonstrators against the war in Ukraine have gathered in cities across Russia, including St. Petersburg. It's likely to go under the radar. It's not the kind of thing that happens overnight. But it does have the potential, I think, to undermine the military to a large extent, she said. To chip away at its status and make young men reluctant to answer the call, either for conscription or for volunteers, and to make their families more likely to protect them and hide them, which is what families did up until recently. Already, as Russia's campaign in Ukraine faces setbacks, its troops have been experiencing morale problems, according to Pentagon spokesman John Kirby. This could be due to a number of factors, including a lack of training, a hostile environment and freezing conditions on the ground, Professor Ledwidge said. But another issue could be that some men didn't know what they were signing up for. Bewildered teenage soldiers on the front line. A report from independent Russian website Meduza suggests that some conscripts were made to sign contracts before they crossed the border into Ukraine. One mother, Maria, told the outlet that she was unable to sleep or eat after discovering her son was sent over to fight. "I don't understand how the conscripts could be sent to war," she said. We have group chats just for the mothers of boys who are serving. And last week, one mother wrote, "Why are they sending conscripts?"